The Battle of Stalingrad was a very long and hard fight during World War II. It started in the summer of 1942, specifically on August 23rd, and it did not end until the cold winter month of February 2nd, 1943. This battle lasted for over 5 months, a period filled with constant danger and struggle. The days and nights were marked by the sounds of guns and explosions. For everyone involved, from the soldiers in the trenches to the people hiding in cellars, time seemed to stretch on forever, each moment a fight for survival. The changing seasons brought new challenges, from the burning heat of summer to the freezing, unforgiving cold of the Russian winter. The battle took place in a city called Stalingrad. This city was located in the southern part of the Soviet Union, which is now modern-day Russia. The city was named after the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, which made it a very important symbol for the country. It was built along the western bank of the wide and powerful Volga River, a major waterway that was crucial for transporting supplies and resources. The city itself was a large industrial center with factories that produced tanks and other war materials. Capturing Stalingrad meant controlling both the river and the industrial heart of the region. Adolf Hitler, the leader of Germany, wanted to capture Stalingrad for several important reasons. Firstly, taking the city would give his army control over the Volga River. This would severely damage the Soviet Union's ability to move oil from the Caucasus region to its industrial centers in the north. Without this oil, the Soviet war machine would struggle to function. Secondly, Stalingrad was a major industrial city, and its capture would be a significant blow to the Soviet economy and its ability to produce weapons. Its strategic location made it a key objective for the German summer offensive in 1942. Finally, the city's name held immense symbolic value. Capturing a city named after his enemy, Joseph Stalin, would be a huge propaganda victory for Hitler and a deep personal humiliation for the Soviet leader. For Hitler, conquering Stalingrad was not just a military goal. It was a matter of personal pride and a way to break the spirit of the Soviet people. He believed that the fall of Stalingrad would demoralize the Red Army and the entire nation, making it easier for Germany to win the war on the Eastern Front. This focus on the city's name turned the battle into a brutal contest of wills between two dictators. The two main sides fighting in the Battle of Stalingrad were the German army, known as the Wehrmacht, and the Soviet Union's army, called the Red Army. The German forces were part of Army Group B, and their main fighting force was the German Sixth Army, led by General Friedrich Paulus. They were supported by armies from Germany's allies, including Italy, Romania, and Hungary. The German soldiers were experienced and well-equipped at the start of the battle. They had advanced weapons and had been very successful in the war so far, pushing deep into Soviet territory with their blitzkrieg or lightning war tactics. The Soviet Union's Red Army was defending the city. The main force was the 62nd Army, under the command of General Vasily Chuikov. These soldiers were ordered by Joseph Stalin to defend the city at all costs. An order was given, not a step back. This meant that any soldier who retreated without permission could be shot. The Soviet soldiers were fighting to protect their homeland and their families. For them, a loss at Stalingrad felt like it could mean the end of their country. They were determined to hold the line, no matter how desperate the situation became, showing incredible resilience and bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. The importance of this battle was immense for both sides. For Germany, winning would secure their eastern flank as they pushed towards the oil fields in the Caucasus. It would also be a massive propaganda victory and a crushing blow to Soviet morale. Hitler became obsessed with taking the city, pouring more and more troops and resources into the fight. He saw it as the key to breaking the Soviet Union's will to resist. The capture of Stalingrad was supposed to be the final decisive step that would lead to Germany's ultimate victory on the Eastern Front. For the Soviet Union, holding Stalingrad was a matter of survival. Losing the city would cut off vital supply lines and could lead to the collapse of their southern front. It was a test of the nation's strength and determination. General Chuikov's strategy was to fight the Germans in close quarters, a style of fighting the Soviets called hugging the enemy. This tactic minimized the effectiveness of German air power and artillery, forcing the battle into a brutal street-by-street fight where the sheer number and tenacity of the Soviet defenders could make a difference. The battle became a symbol of Russian resistance against the German invasion. The fighting in Stalingrad was unlike anything seen before. It was not a battle of open fields, but a brutal struggle inside a city. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, bombed Stalingrad heavily, turning buildings into piles of rubble and twisted metal. But these ruins became perfect hiding places and defensive positions for the Soviet soldiers. The battle was fought for every street, every house, every factory, and even every floor of a building. Soldiers used sewers to move around secretly and set up sniper nests in bombed-out apartments. This type of close-quarters urban warfare was incredibly slow, costly, and terrifying for everyone involved. Life for the soldiers on both sides was a living nightmare. They faced constant danger from snipers, machine guns, and sudden ambushes. Food and clean water were scarce, and medical supplies were almost non-existent for those who were wounded. The soldiers were always tired, hungry, and stressed. In the summer, they suffered from the heat and swarms of flies, while in the winter they faced the brutal Russian cold. Frostbite was as big a danger as enemy bullets. Many soldiers suffered from lice and disease, and the psychological toll of the constant, relentless fighting was immense, pushing men to their absolute limits. The people of Stalingrad, the civilians, were caught in the middle of this terrible conflict. Before the battle was fully joined, many had not been evacuated. They had to live through the intense bombing and the street fighting that followed. Many families hid in dark, cold cellars and basements, listening to the sounds of the battle raging above them. They had very little food and no electricity or clean water. They lived in constant fear of being discovered by German soldiers or being killed by a stray shell or bomb. Thousands of civilians died from starvation, disease, or the fighting itself. The city itself became a character in the battle. The massive factories like the Red October steel plant and the Barricadi gun factory were turned into fortresses. Workers continued to repair tanks and weapons right on the factory floor, sometimes driving them directly from the assembly line into battle. The landscape of rubble and ruins favored the defenders, who knew the terrain intimately. The Germans called this urban warfare Rattenkrieg, or Rat War, because the fighting took place in the rubble, basements and sewers like rats fighting in a maze. It was a grinder of men and machines. The turning point of the battle came in November 1942. While the German Sixth Army was trapped fighting inside Stalingrad, the Soviet leaders were planning a huge counterattack. On November 19th, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus. Soviet forces, which had been secretly gathered in large numbers, attacked the weaker Romanian and Hungarian armies that were protecting the German flanks, north and south of the city. The Soviet tanks and infantry quickly broke through these lines. Within just a few days, the two Soviet forces met at the town of Kalach, completely surrounding General Paulus's Sixth Army inside Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army, along with parts of the Fourth Panzer Army, was now trapped. They had about 300,000 soldiers caught inside the encirclement, which the Soviets called the Kessel, or cauldron. Hitler refused to allow General Paulus to try and break out. Instead, he promised to supply the trapped army by air. He ordered them to hold their position and fight to the last man. However, the German Air Force was not able to fly in enough food, ammunition, or medical supplies. The promised airlift was a failure, and the soldiers inside the Kessel grew weaker from starvation and the freezing winter. The winter of 1942 to 1943 was extremely cold, with temperatures dropping far below freezing. The German soldiers were not prepared for this weather. They did not have proper winter clothing and slowly began to freeze and starve to death. The Red Army squeezed the pocket tighter and tighter, capturing the last airfields and making any resupply impossible. By January 1943, the situation for the Germans was hopeless. They were out of food, out of ammunition, and too weak to fight. The Soviets offered a chance to surrender, but Hitler forbade it, demanding a sacrifice. Finally, on January 31, 1943, General Paulus surrendered the southern part of the trapped army. He was the first German field marshal in history to be captured. A few days later, on February 2nd, the last of the remaining German forces in the northern part of the pocket also surrendered. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. Of the nearly 300,000 soldiers trapped, only about 91,000 survived to be taken as prisoners. The Soviet victory was a huge turning point in World War II. It stopped the German advance into the Soviet Union and was a devastating defeat for Hitler. From this point on, the German army was mostly on the defensive on the Eastern Front.